Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? Well, you, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Welcome back to The Business You Really Want. In this episode, it is the second installment of our Solo to CEO series. We are going to be covering the essential leadership skills that every successful CEO must develop. Develop them sooner, you can develop them later, but you got to start building them. Because whether you're leading a small team, whether you're leading yourself, or you want to scale into a larger organization, these are the skills that will help you inspire, manage, and empower your team to reach new heights. And yeah, sometimes you are the team. If you're a team of one, you got to learn how to inspire yourself. My name is Tonya Kubo, and I am joined by operations expert extraordinaire, Gwen Bortner. And today we are talking about leadership, specifically the key skills you need to successfully lead your team as a CEO. Or like I've said, and I'll say it like a million times today, even yourself. Before we jump in though, Gwen, I'm curious if you could share a quick story of a solopreneur who you can think of that recently improved their leadership skills and as a result saw a significant change in their business.
Well, okay, let's just be honest. Anytime we improve our leadership skills, it almost always improves our business. So
yeah, that was from the Department of Redundancy department right there. Okay.
Yeah. Because it really does.
Yeah.
And so there's almost no end to the number of examples that we can give.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to give an example from a while back that is mostly a solopreneur improving their leadership skills, since you talked about that piece, because we often don't think about that we have to lead ourselves.
Okay.
And that honestly is one of the hardest things to do, right? Is lead ourselves. And so this person really is a solopreneur. They're a creative. They're an artist. They do, creative things. And one of the things was actually realizing when their work worked for them. And so part of leading is understanding how do you work, or how do other people work, and how do you maximize that in a way that works for everybody on the team, regardless of who they are. And so even if you're a solopreneur, if you have anybody else in your family that is, sharing your space, that's part of, you actually have to do some leading with them as well. Even if it's, if you have a dog or a cat, there can be some leading there as well. But all of these things is thinking about how do we do this? And the issue was, so often we get caught in what we believe we are supposed to do because it's what everybody else does. And leading isn't necessarily about following the path everyone else has followed. It's about understanding what is the path that's going to be the best and most direct path for you.
Okay.
And sometimes that can look very, very alternative. And in this particular case, what was happening was they were trying to do things in the way that they had always done them before, and what they, kind of working in that kind of corporate mindset of, I'm supposed to work from 8 to 5. I'm supposed to, work Monday through Friday, all of these things. But where they got to was realizing that parts of that worked and parts of it didn't work. And in this case, the part of the leading was saying, what's not working and what do I want to do instead, and or stop doing altogether. And all of these things, what they started discovering is within the same amount of work was getting done in way less time.
Mm.
And so as you start looking at that, all of a sudden it's like, is that good leadership? Yes, of course that's good leadership, because that's, we talked about having space to think and do some other things. Well, if you've got tasks that you think take 40 hours a week and you start using better time, you may discover that actually those tasks only take 30 hours a week. Well, that just gave you 10 hours a week for other things, which could be strategic thinking time. It could be, in this case, this is a creative person. And so one of the things that they got back was play time, where they were playing with art, not doing art as their job.
Right. As a product to sell.
As a product to sell, as an output, as a task. Which of course then gave them more creativity to do more things. It's a follow-on thing. And so really saying, what are those tasks? What are the best times to do them? Do I have to do them in the typical time, or do I do them at other times? And it's one of the things that I talk to almost all my entrepreneurs about is like, sometimes you do need to do things from, kind of a typical 8 to 5, depending on what your job is and who you're serving and all of those others. But in this case, she did not. And we found that a different schedule actually worked way better for her.
Nice. That's a great example of self-leadership. And I think really even a more powerful one, right? Because it's self-leadership that looks different from other people. And I think for me, that is really what jumped out, because, you and me talk about this all the time. As somebody who works from home, has young children, a lot of people in my same situation tend to shift their work later in the day. So, they may work 3 to midnight, for instance, because that works for them. They don't work when school's not in session, and they don't work weekends and all those things. And I shift my day much earlier because I do my work better when everybody is asleep. But I really should not be trusted to brain after 8 p.m. No good thing with me happens after 8 p.m. And
some interesting things sometimes happen with you after 8 p.m., but I'm not sure that good would be necessarily the right description.
That is a story for another day, but that is exactly the truth. There are no lies detected there, Gwen. So I like that example a lot for that reason. Also, when I think of leadership skills, and I think of like the leadership skills I've had to develop over time and some of the ones that were the hardest, I think of the vision setting, right? Like the strategic thinking. Is that hard for a lot of CEOs or a lot of people who have been a shop of one, a lot of women entrepreneurs? Is that hard for everybody? Does that have to be hard? Are some people naturally wired that way?
So I think true strategic thinking is something that you usually have to have learned in some environment, and it is not something that is available to be learned in lots of environments. And I also think it gets misnamed a lot. Where people say this is strategic thinking. It's like, that's not actually strategic thinking. That's just giant project planning, which is a different thing. And so I do think that's part of it. And we talked a little bit about it in the prior episode, but so I think that that's a piece of leadership. But the piece that we haven't talked about, that quite honestly I think is the bigger piece of leadership, is the accountability piece.
Say more.
So,
because I can tell by your face you have more. But you were trying to be polite.
I didn't know if you wanted a specific question or not, so I was trying to give you space.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but please say more.
So I think the accountability piece is the piece that most people struggle with in leadership, because accountability gets a bad rap because back to, it's kind of like strategic planning, that a lot of people think they're doing strategic planning and they're just doing big long-term project planning, which is not, it can be strategic, but it's usually not. And so I think accountability gets a bad rap, but to me, leadership is a combination of visioning and the strategic piece, and being able to think beyond, the immediacy, the relative immediacy, and combined with being able to say, I want to make sure we do all the things that we need to do to actually get to this vision that we have. Because that to me is the balance. A lot of people are really good about visioning, but they don't actually want to hold anybody accountable if they have a team, or even hold themselves truly accountable. Because it's like, yeah, I didn't really feel like it. Okay, well, yeah. And that may be actually a valid thing. I'm not saying it's wrong, because I believe in lots and lots of right answers. But why did you not feel like it? Accountability is a bigger piece. And like I said, accountability gets a bad rap. And so I think a lot of folks, when they talk about leading and accountability, they feel like they're being the mom. They're, and it's like, that's different. And being the mom, that's a really important job. And there is some accountability to it, but that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about accountability within the business. We're really talking about, are we doing the things that we should be doing at the time that we should be doing them? Are we living up to our promises to each other and to ourselves? And if we aren't, are we making proactive choices about these things as opposed to reactive choices? Are we making decisions instead of waiting for decisions to happen to us? And so to me, that's that balance of vision and decision making and accountability. Those to me are the things that really, really create that leadership piece. And for me, using the example that I started with, the self-leadership is actually saying, where do I want to go? Okay, how much time do I need? Where I'm going to make decisions about when I work, and then I'm going to be good about working at those times. That's actually those three pieces. It's the vision, it's the decision, and then it's being held accountable to that decision.
You mentioned them and different orders each time, and I'm like, how am I ranking those in my notes? Because this I had to take notes on. Which is not a bad thing, by the way. If you're listening or you're watching, this is your first episode, I take notes all the time during these episodes, because Gwen says things and I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. So now I have to write it down so I remember it, so that we have actually...
People think we're scripted, and we are...
I know, people totally think we're scripted. They have no idea how this actually operates. So what I heard is vision comes... First of all, what I heard loud and clear is it's not one... is on top of two, is on top of three. It is almost, it's, if you are listening, I'm sorry, but you're missing us spinning our hands as if they're planets rotating around a very large star. So we've got the vision piece, then we have the decision-making piece. So the key leadership skills is you've got to have the ability to vision setting, however you want to say that, making decisions. And then there's the accountability piece, which is living by the decisions you make, and also creating a culture where everybody lives by the decisions that are made.
Right.
And so I want to break these down a little bit further because I think it's important. So with the vision, something that I have seen, Gwen, because we all talk about the importance of vision. We vision cast, we have vision boards, we go on visioning retreats. We know that it's important to have a clear, compelling vision for the business. And I think most people understand that that is a hallmark of strong leadership. Here's where I think people fall, I don't want to say fall apart, but this is where we fall down on the job of being the visionary leader for our business. It's transferring the vision.
Transferring the vision is really hard, because often the vision is very intuitive. And that means there's a whole lot of stuff that we don't necessarily have words to. And when we, particularly, we're talking about solo to CEO, when we're in the solo mode, the vision can really be all about us. And figuring out how does this actually apply to the bigger world if we start bringing other people in. Although if you work with me, you'll hear me say it still needs to be a lot about you because you're still the one driving the business. So if you're creating a business that makes you miserable, then that's actually a bad answer, right? So there still has to be a balance, but how do you make it compelling enough? And I think this is totally my opinion. We've never talked about this before, but I think part of the problem is sometimes we get too sold on the vision. Like it needs to be this big, dramatic, very cool thing. And often that's easy for a lot of the folks that are drawn to entrepreneurship. Translating that into practical, tactical, how do we sell this to a bunch of other people is really, really hard. But if the vision is actually relatively simple, which is not how we're taught to think about visions. We're taught to think about them in these big, kind of. I keep seeing fluffy clouds and luxury and all, and it's like, no, it really needs to be simple, because the simplicity allows it to translate.
Right. Well, and as a marketing professional, I have sat in a lot of strategic planning meetings for large organizations. I've come from higher ed. I've worked in a lot of educational systems. And you say the vision is supposed to be simple, and I'm 100% with you. And I very rarely have seen a vision that is fewer than 450 words and requires a dictionary to figure out what they're talking about, right?
Yep.
Sometimes I think the vision is written to sound like you have vision more than it's written to actually be lived out. So you've talked about the vision needs to be very simple. Can you give me an example of a simple vision? If somebody's like, well, I think I have a vision, but I don't know if it counts.
It always counts.
Okay, that's a good answer. Always counts.
It always counts. There are times that the vision is, I need a way to be able to feed my family, and I need to have enough flexibility to not be working for somebody else because I've got, all sorts of things. That's actually a vision. Okay. It's not cool. It's not exciting. It's not, all the things that we want a vision to be, but that in itself is also a vision. It is the driver for it. Right. My vision is not actually very complex. I mean, it could be, but my vision is I want to help people have businesses that they love and that I can help them solve the problems that they don't even know are problems.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our vision for the podcast, right, is we want women to stay in business, if they want to stay in business, and not to exit their business out of burnout, out of frustration, because they think that the only way to do it is a way that makes them miserable.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. That's very, very simple. So the question then is, how do you transfer that to others? Or do you not need to? I mean, maybe that's not important.
You do to the point that it matters for what they're doing.
Okay.
You don't necessarily need to like using my previous example of I need to feed my children and I need to have the flexibility. You don't necessarily need to transfer all of that. There's going to probably be about why I'm doing the thing that I do. And I happen to love, fill in the blank. And so that's the way I'm doing it. Okay, great. Or I have huge experience in that, or, fine. You need to let the people know that aren't you enough so that they don't start leading it in a different direction. And this is one of the places that we talk about culture, which we haven't even, talked about. I don't know what we talk about culture, but that's one of those
some point, future episode, not today.
Yeah. But really that's what it is. It's enough to know what the culture is. And part of the thing, and you can verify all of this, because when you started working with me, one of my first things is I don't have a fixed answer for anybody about anything. There's some that I am usually 98% sure that this is what the first answer is going to be, but I still test it every single solitary time. And so part of my vision is I don't have one solution. I have lots of solutions. And that's part of my vision. We talk about it all the time. Context matters. That's part of my vision. And that's the part that's important for you to know as my marketing person. It's part that's important for our customer support people to know that we want to do things in a consistent way, but we also aren't so consistent that we're rigid.
Right.
We want to be able to do the things that make sense for each client as appropriate.
I like that. So that's the vision piece. Now I think it's important to talk about the decision-making piece, because I think it's easy to be like, well, I don't have a problem making decisions. I make decisions all the time. Because you do, right? Every single one of us in business, most of us have decision fatigue, quite honestly, because we make so many decisions. But I think there's a difference between, I do all the things, I wear all the hats decision making and CEO level decision making. How do you describe that?
Yeah, for me, it's the bigger decisions that are more likely to go wrong.
Okay.
So I'll use one that we did recently. Earlier this year, my big decision was I'm going to invest significantly into marketing in a way that I never have before. That was a strategic decision.
Right.
And as part of that, you put together a plan, which was great. And we looked at it and we agreed to it. And so we made a decision and said, this is what it's going to be. Now, also part of the decision making is when something comes up and it's like, does this fit? Does this not fit? And are we making an adjustment?
Right.
And so quite honestly, the podcast is one of those things that wasn't actually planned in that marketing plan that we agreed to. But as we talked about it, that was a strategic decision that said, yeah, no, we're actually going to do this. It's going to change the budget. It's going to do some things. We're still going to do it. We talked about, are we doing just audio? We're doing video. We had reasons that we chose to do, but all of that is the strategic. And this is one place that I have a great strength is I make a decision quickly. I don't dilly-dally over decisions, because the time of thinking about it, unless there's some more data to be gathered, usually doesn't provide really any more insight, but it does take up a whole lot more mental cycles.
Right.
And so to me, that's the difference of a CEO versus a task person, because a CEO will say, I'm going to make this decision and it might be wrong. And if it is, then I will make another decision.
Right. That's the nice thing about owning your own business. There is never not another decision to make. Yeah. You always get a chance to make another decision.
And a lot of the CEOs that I work with, that's one of the things is they will get caught not making a decision. And my mom, in all of her wisdom, I don't know how well, I actually do know, it was years ago when I was in the process of thinking about getting divorced. And she said, you need to understand that not making a decision is also a decision.
Yep.
And I've lived with that for a really long time, and I feed it back an awful lot, because people are like, well, I'm just not sure. It's like, well, you're starting to make a decision by not making a decision.
Right. Exactly. And for our listeners, I just want to point of clarification. We're not talking about Arliss. We're talking about Gwen's life before Arliss. I just imagine a poor listener like, wow, she just dropped a bomb. Old lives, new lives.
This was decades ago. This was a really long time ago.
So, I just felt the need. Poor Arliss. I didn't want any of his coworkers, because I knew his coworkers listened to the show. So I didn't want any of his coworkers to be like, dude, we got to tell you something. So what I liked about that, yeah, I'm going to bring us back. I promise I am. You know, I really did think you were going to go into, well, oftentimes when we're in the thick of it, we make these reactive decisions. And when we start to step into our CEO role is when we get much more proactive. We're thinking ahead, we're planning. But like you covered that, but you also talked about, it's about being comfortable with making decisions where the stakes are higher and starting to develop a comfort with evaluating risk. And I would say, you didn't say this explicitly, this is just my interpretation, but it's evaluating risk. It's understanding that there's risk in every decision, whether it's small or big, and being okay emotionally, physically, in all the ways with moving forward, even though you're never going to know 100% whether you are right or wrong until you're on the other side.
And that often both decisions would have both been right and both would be wrong. I mean, because that's the other thing is that often we're choosing between two things that aren't a yes and a no. They're potentially both yeses or they're potentially both nos. And we're just saying, this is the yes I choose today.
Right. Well, that reminds me, I was talking to a solopreneur today, and that was, they've been going back and forth between, do they build out their business or do they go and get a job, right? Do they just say, you know what, I'm going to put entrepreneurship on the shelf for now. I'm going to go get a job. I'm going to get some things settled straight, and then I'm going to come back to it, or maybe I'll never come back to it. And they, as they were talking it out, and you've seen this happen before, Gwen, as they were talking it out, they came to the understanding that, one is not right and the other's not wrong. It's like, I could actually do both of these things. What I have to ask myself is, based on everything I know right now, what's most likely going to take me to a reality I actually want to be?
Yep, that's exactly it.
Oh my gosh. I love it when I have life experiences that match what you say on the show. It just ties things up in a bow so much better for me. So I want to keep us on track though. Vision was the first leadership skill we talked about that has to be developed. Then we talked about decision making and just getting comfortable with living with the decisions we make. Finally, accountability. And what I love about how you talk about accountability is really it's saying what we're going to do, doing what we said we were going to do, and then double checking that everybody is doing what we said we were going to do, how we said we were going to do it. Why do you think that is such an important leadership skill? Because, we've talked about the whole, like, some people think you're parenting adults, but what is it about that almost three-way look at accountability? What is it that makes that specifically leadership versus you're just a really good project manager?
The real thing with accountability is it's not just making sure people do things, but it's making sure that we're all, including us, right, the leader, we're doing the right things, the best things, the most productive in the moving the needle things. And often accountability is being associated with checking off all the boxes, but that's only making sure that we're busy. That's not making sure that we're actually moving the needle in
I don't like
whatever way we want to be moving the needle.
I'm feeling called out right now. Thank you. Okay, keep talking.
Well, we all feel that way from time to time, but that is part of accountability, right? Is being able to have someone say that to you, and for you to be able to reflect back on that and say, "Oh yeah, am I doing that or am I not doing that?" I mean, we have a relatively new client who was actually talking about that this week in her weekly course of action that we use as our accountability document, where she's starting to feel overwhelmed, and her natural response to being overwhelmed is doing lots of busy work. that doesn't actually move the needle in the way that it's supposed to move. Okay, that's really great accountability because she's being reflective about what's going on. And to me, that's what the accountability piece is to say, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and am I doing it? And should I still be doing this? And really being curious. And part of that curiosity is, does that appropriately align with the vision? So now we start making that circle around and around and around, right? How all three of these things connect to one another. And was that decision the right decision? Or is it time to make a different decision? Right? That's also part of that accountability process. It's not just about, did I do all the things? But it also is, are you doing the things that you said you're supposed to be doing? I mean, so that is part of it. But if not, then we start asking questions, right? To say, well, why are we not getting the things done? Well, is it because you've got 800 things on your list and you have time to do 500 of them? Well, then that's why 300 of them aren't getting done, right? Are you doing the right 500? You know, there's lots of conversation that goes on with that accountability, but we're always afraid that it's going to be about shame on you. And good accountability is never shame on you. It's like, why is this not working? Let's figure it out. And if it's not working because you're not the right person for this job, it's not shame on you. It's, let's release you out into the workforce to find the right job for you, and let's find someone else who will actually be the right person for this job.
Okay. Oh my gosh. That was
a lot. I'm sorry, but
no, it was a lot, but it was so good because, you know, you took us, I mean, like the essential leadership skills. I'm just going to recap this super quickly. Right. But if you want to be successful in your business, right? Whether you want to label yourself as a CEO or you like to be a small business owner, whatever title you like, what you need in order to be highly effective is you need to be able to cast that vision. You need to be able to use that vision as your framework or as your test against the decisions that you make. You've got to be able to make the decision. I mean, you made that abundantly clear, but you know, we all know that, like you said, no decision is also a decision. And then the accountability piece, and I never get tired of hearing you talk about accountability, mainly because you're one of the few people who talks about accountability in a shame-free, judgment-free way. And I do think that's so important. I think more people would be open to accountability if they had experience without shame or judgment tied to it. And so, you know, these skills, I think anybody listening would say, well, they're actually pretty good human skills, but they are critical skills if you are in a place and you want your business to grow from where you're at to a different place, whether that is larger or that is simply more efficient, doing, you know, same results, fewer hours, any of that. And so I'm going to leave us here because we have another episode coming on this from Solo to CEO series. And so if you want to dive deeper into developing your leadership skills, please visit us online at thebusinessyoureallywant.com. See the show notes for additional resources. And don't forget to come back because for the next episode in our Solo to CEO series, we're going to talk about delegation. Yeah, the big D word. How to delegate effectively and how to build a high-performing team, because your ability to delegate actually impacts their ability to perform for you. So we will see you then, and we hope you are enjoying the series so far. Let us know what you think. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallywant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.